Pope Leo XIV shook the theological world with a single sentence. Speaking of religious freedom, he said something many see as a direct echo of the Abu Dhabi Declaration of 2019, in which Pope Francis spoke of religious pluralism as God's will. But what did Leo XIV really say? Stay with us until the end. In the heart of Rome, in the solemn hall of the popes, Pope Leo XIV addressed representatives of the international Catholic organization Aid to the Church in Need. The occasion, marked by the Jubilee of Hope, gave the pontiff the opportunity to reiterate one of the themes dearest to his recent preaching: religious freedom as the foundation of human dignity and social peace. The context is not marginal, as the meeting takes place in an ecclesial season in which the themes of migration and interreligious coexistence occupy a large part of the pastoral and diplomatic debate of the Holy See. The speech, delivered on October 10, 2025, was received with attention and disseminated in several languages, but one passage in particular sparked a wave of discussion among theologians, journalists, and faithful attached to tradition. Quoting St. Paul, the Pope recalled the need to suffer alongside those persecuted for their faith, emphasizing that religious freedom is not optional, but a fundamental right, rooted in the dignity of man, created in the image of God. However, what really sparked the debate was his next statement. The Catholic Church has always defended religious freedom for all peoples. A sentence that, according to many observers, appears not only bold, but also historically inaccurate, especially when compared with the traditional doctrine expressed by Leo XIV's predecessors. It is precisely on this point that the apparently peaceful and pastoral discourse takes on considerable theological weight, because it touches on one of the most delicate issues in the modern history of the Church: the relationship between truth, error, and freedom. In the hours that followed, Catholic social media and comment channels most sensitive to doctrinal issues registered an immediate buzz. Some welcomed the Pope's words as a sign of continuity with the conciliar message of openness and dialogue, while others expressed strong doubts, believing that such a declaration risks obscuring centuries of very different ecclesial teaching and practice. Among the most critical voices, that of a commentator on X, formerly Twitter, summarized the discomfort of many faithful. The Pope, by saying that the Church has always defended religious freedom, demonstrates that he needs a more historically accurate editor. Popes may be wrong on historical matters, but it is a fact. The Church has not always supported religious freedom as an absolute right. A blunt statement which reverberates like a symbolic slap in the face throughout the Catholic world and reopens a debate that has never truly died down. Can today's Church contradict its tradition of yesterday? Upon closer inspection, the tension stems from a precise but often ignored theological distinction. The Church, throughout the centuries, has tolerated the presence of non-Catholic cults in certain circumstances for reasons of order and social peace, but has never recognized error's right to exist as if it were a parallel truth. It is an ancient principle, summed up in the traditional motto, "Error has no rights." For this reason, Leo XIV's declaration appears to many as a dangerous simplification, confusing prudential tolerance with freedom of worship as an absolute value. The fact that the pontiff inserted this phrase in a context dedicated to persecuted Christians accentuates the ambiguity. Speaking of religious freedom in itself is a noble act, but affirming that the Church has always supported it means rewriting the memory of the Catholic tradition itself. Historically, the Church has never conceived of religious freedom as an unlimited right, but as a question of moral order, subordinated to truth. This distinction is what many critics of Leo XIV's speech wanted to recall. Recalling the texts of the great popes of the 19th century, in particular Leo XIII and Pius IX. For centuries, the magisterium has maintained that authentic freedom does not consist in being able to believe anything, but rather in being able to adhere without coercion to the truth revealed by God. The encyclical Libertas, published by Leo XIII in 1888, represents one of the pinnacles of this doctrine. In it, the pontiff clearly distinguishes the freedom of good from the freedom of error, condemning the modern idea of a natural right to freedom of thought, speech, and worship without moral limits. It is entirely unlawful, wrote Leo XIII, to claim, defend, or grant unconditional freedom of thought, speech, or worship, as if these were so many rights granted to man by nature. Unequivocal words which belie the idea of a church always favorable to religious freedom as a universal value. Libertas's logic was not that of intolerance, but that of truth. The church did not impose faith, but refused to equate true and false. Where political circumstances required it, he tolerated the presence of other religions, as long as they did not threaten the moral order and the faith of Catholics. This was the difference between tolerance and modern religious freedom. The former is a prudential concession, the latter an ideological claim. Faced with this doctrinal tradition, Leo XIV's affirmation appears as a paradigm shift, or at least as a selective reading of ecclesial history. Theologians most attentive to the coherence of the magisterium see this not just as an oversight, but as a symptom of a new approach that for decades has tended to reinterpret doctrine through the categories of liberal modernity. Already under Pope Francis, the Church had experienced a period of ambiguous language regarding interreligious dialogue. From the beginning of his pontificate, Francis insisted on universal brotherhood and the need to consider all religions as possible paths to encounter God, though without ever directly stating this. However, the signing of the Abu Dhabi document in 2019, with the affirmation that religious pluralism and diversity are a wise divine will, raised a wave of perplexity among the faithful most attached to tradition. Those words, difficult to reconcile with the Catholic principle of the salvific unity of Christ and the Church, have been interpreted by many as a sign of surrender to theological relativism. Since then, the debate has never subsided. Papal vocabulary has continued to oscillate between the proclamation of truth and the universal embrace of differences, creating a gray area in which the distinction between the Catholic faith and other religions appears increasingly blurred. In this context, Leo XIV's declaration on religious freedom, always defended by the Church, almost echoes that same approach. A church that speaks the language of inclusion rather than doctrine, and that tends to reduce its mission to human solidarity. While recalling Christ and the suffering of the persecuted, Leo XIV's speech is not limited to an act of compassion. It takes on a tone that closely recalls the anthropocentric perspective inaugurated by Francis. Faith is no longer presented as the truth that judges the world, but as one voice, among others, seeking space in a plural religious landscape. It is a subtle but undeniable line of continuity. From Abu Dhabi to the Vatican, religious freedom becomes the new moral banner, while the primacy of truth seems to be silently retreating behind words of tolerance. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.